there, and welcome to our final week of reviewing the Old Testament festivals that God gave to Israel and their meaning in the New Testament and the role that they played in Jesus's life. So we're here at the very end and we have 2 more to go. And I'm going to move through this super quick because I feel like my videos have been a little long recently. So we're talking about the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles and the 8th day. And you can find that in Leviticus 23, verses 33 through 44. And I'm going to let you read that for yourself. And the really interesting thing about this was that it was a 7-day festival, and it was to commemorate coming out of Egypt. And so the ancient Israelites were told to live in booths or temporary dwellings, and they made them with palm branches, as the Jews do even today. And they were to keep it as a memorial through their generations forever. And the other interesting things are that in other places in the Bible, you're actually commanded to rejoice during this festival. Commanded. You must rejoice. Also, it's a feast of the fat things. So it came at the end of the harvest season, and you were commanded to take a portion of that, and you were to spend it during those 7 days. So you were rejoicing and you were kind of living big. It was kind of awesome. And then finally, after those 7 days were finished, you had an 8th day, which was separate but connected to these 7 days. So let's talk about this in the New Testament. In John 7, there's actually a recorded place where Jesus kept both the feast and the 8th day, and he preached at various times on both of those events. So that's really cool. You can read that for yourself, John 7, verses 10 through 38. You're also going to want to read Zechariah 14, verse 16, where it becomes very clear that these days are linked to the return of Jesus Christ, like we've talked about on the Feast of Trumpets, and then binding of Satan on atonement, and then the very next thing, just like the feast comes after those 2 events, the very next thing in God's plan is that Christ will reign on earth for 1,000 years while Satan is bound. And so these days represent that time. And you can read about that in Zechariah 14, verse 16, and also in Isaiah 2, verses 2 through 4. Beautiful scriptures specifically talking about a millennium reign where people will keep these days and they're clearly tied together. So, as New Testament Christians, we celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles thinking about the return of Jesus Christ, thinking ahead to the time when his kingdom will be on this earth and everything will be turned upside down. The world will no longer be the same. And instead, we'll be able to rejoice in his blessings and in his purpose for mankind without the presence of Satan. Well, what about that 8th day? You're going to want to read in Revelation 20, verse 4. It will talk about the millennium reign of Christ. And then also in verse 11. And because Revelations moves chronologically through these events, we know that that 8th day will actually represent the great white throne judgment, where everyone who has ever lived will get the chance to stand before God and to make a decision on how they want to proceed. Do they want to live God's way? Do they want to be accepted into his kingdom? Or do they choose not to? And so it's a beautiful and encouraging and uplifting occasion. And it's also very solemn because we think about all the dead who have ever lived, who never knew about Christ, who never knew anything about the Bible or God's plan. All of those people will have the opportunity to stand before God and to choose for themselves. So it's incredibly uplifting, and many Christians today choose to keep these days and realize that they're commanded in the Bible. And so it's something that we do joyfully and we enjoy so much every year. I hope these videos have been helpful for you. We'll have some more posts this week regarding these days because we'll be keeping them here at Stir Devotion. And so we hope that you enjoy that material also.